for. Ja'Marr Chase, record-setting start to his career, already an auto-start player. That and more this week on the Footballguys Dynasty Show. And Jordan, how high is too high? Dare I say, because you were big on Justin Jefferson, is he Justin Jefferson plus in the market right now?
He may be, but it's the easiest sell of all time if that's what we're going to do. Listen, you look at the profile, and we are redoing AJ Brown. We're just absolutely redoing the AJ Brown experience. We are buying at the height of, we're getting hyped up on a young player coming in who's performing at the absolute top of touchdown variance, and you're buying that right now if you're taking him above Justin Jefferson, which is malfeasance of the highest level. When you look at the disappointing part about AJ Brown should be really instructive right now. When you look at Ja'Marr Chase, he is 33rd in terms of expected points. He's 4th in terms of actual points. He has 2.1 expected touchdowns. He's got 6. Right, all of those things are very, very fluky, and that's just one of those things where it's a big cautionary tale. You go back, you look at AJ Brown in 2019, his rookie season coming in, 58th in terms of expected points. He outproduced that by 4 points per game. In 2020, he was 29th in expected points, and he was in the top 10 at the position in terms of points per game. What do both of those seasons have in common? He doubled up his expected touchdowns. Now, fast forward, he's again right at 30th in terms of expected points, and he's at expectation. He's got 2.5 touchdowns expected so far. He's got 2 on the season. Lo and behold, where is he? Wide receiver 39 in PPR. These things, you can't beat them long term. You just can't. And if you're buying at the height of Ja'Marr Chase right now, be prepared to be disappointed going forward.
Well, and hot streaks, again, are followed by cold streaks or more normal streaks. And I think the two things you're outlining with A.J. Brown, previously, and Ja'Marr Chase is touchdowns and long plays. He is broke. And A.J. Brown, I remember, he was breaking every deep dig route or slant. It seems like he was taking it to the house. There was just nobody there. There was no safety on the other side to limit it to 25 yards. It would go for 60. So with Ja'Marr Chase, after the catch, I mean, dare I say he's CJ Uzomah-like in terms of his open field ability, and that's no disrespect to CJ Uzomah.
This is a CJ Uzomah friendly podcast.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Friend of the show, CJU. And and so those wide receiver big plays, and frankly, we haven't seen that as much from Justin Jefferson this year, right? He's merely been a very good receiver, NFL and fantasy wise, and he's still high, but he's not as high and not as highlight reelish as Ja'Marr Chase right now. But I think we're seeing one thing I do enjoy is that Ja'Marr Chase has the love, but this is far more deserved than all of the so-and-so is the flavor of the week Dynasty wide receiver 1 from last year talk. I thought all of those were inaccurate, but now Ja'Marr Chase, he's on a record-setting pace. That the only guys that I've seen in my database since the mid-90s with a point per game finish higher is Odell Beckham and Randy Moss. So again, what he's doing is historic. But the bigger picture thing, and I think what you're doing is important, which is you're talking about like these shorter term bands of oscillation. I will point out that of these peers, the guys that finished top 10 as a rookie, we'll see if Chase ends up finishing there. He's got a head start. But the average wide receiver 1 finishes is 5 for their career. So that would be 4 more than, post year 1. That is pretty much, I mean, other than having like a 21-year-old running back that has a really strong, they finished as a running back 1, their profile is sound. That's pretty much an equal footing with that guy. And so this is pretty much at wide receiver all you can ask for, because he's actually got the top 5 pedigree. So if you're later first round, or especially if you're round 2 and beyond, it's a different calculus. There really is an advantage to being round 1 and doing this, and the higher up in the draft, the better. So he has the perk of being a top 1%er, as I say, which is a 99% overall projection model score for my ranking purposes. And then, so he has that. He also has the elite pedigree, and he's doing this. So he pretty much does have everything in the profile you are looking for from college to the beginning of his NFL career. And I think what you're saying is important, though, because I think people might assume the rest of the year he's going to just go absolutely bonkers. And there's regression even in a partial season sample.
Oh, yeah. All you got to do is go back and check out DK Metcalf last year. Remember when we were saying that he was the greatest thing? It was probably like this week last year. It was right around this time last year was when DK Metcalf was the greatest wide receiver in the history of Dynasty, right? I mean, that was when we had nothing better to do in 2020. So we anointed everyone wide receiver 1 every week. It was like the running gag. We didn't, but the community did. Let me just 1 second, just to give you an idea on the stats angle of this, just one thing to just put this right into context. 59 targets for Justin Jefferson through 6 weeks, 51 for Ja'Marr Chase through 7 weeks. Right. There is no margin for error when you are performing this much over expectation, and there's only downside. With Justin Jefferson, you're hitting a really, really broad target, and we know that he can sort of sustain what he does because we've seen it for a season and a half. We've seen, like, if you just
of the sample size.
Correct. And if you just sort of shook this up in terms of like, if Ja'Marr Chase finishes as like wide receiver 10, just like assume that for a second, like, and he just finishes wide receiver 10 and you just shook up his weeks, right? Like it could look like this to start. And then he sort of has a sort of okay rest of the season. And
he's wide receiver 18 for the rest of the year.
Right. And it's like, you're kind of like, oh, okay. Like he had an okay, like, yeah, he had a pretty good start to the season, but you feel totally different than right now when he's 4th in terms of per game stuff. Again, when he's just overperforming what you can reasonably expect going forward. So I think it's dangerous to buy at the ceiling. Ultimately.
Can I give an example trade of buying at the ceiling? This is from a listener that asked me this question of like, if you don't talk me out of this, I'm doing it. And it was like a ticking time bomb of respond or I'm doing this. Like, am I missing something? And so this is in the trade section. We'll put it up here because it's Ja'Marr Chase centric. So it's a 10 team, but it's got decent starting lineups. So Ja'Marr Chase, aka the Oracle, was traded for. Now, this is basically an entire wide receiver core. Check this out. DeAndre Hopkins plus CeeDee Lamb plus Mike Williams. All of that for the Oracle.
It's hard to lose on the other side of that. Right? Like even if you don't like, and you've got
3 round 1 picks that are all producing in the top 15 to 20 this year.
Right. And you've got a lot of ways that you can, like, you could be on the Ja'Marr Chase side and win that. But you have a lot more outs. Like you have it's a great Lamb, betting
right?
opportunity.
I mean, Lamb, you're getting a younger piece. Like if you were getting Mike Williams, Hopkins, and let's insert someone older and less stable. Sure. Yes.
Right.
I mean, there are plenty of ways to lose that deal, and graphically so 18 months from now, easily. But you're talking about, like, should Chase be worth like Lamb plus? No. I mean, Dak Prescott is a more established quarterback. What if Amari Cooper isn't around? I mean, and Lamb is already overproducing, Amari Cooper. So but Hopkins, I mean, over the next 2 seasons, Hopkins might outproduce Chase on his own. Like there's just so much fluff in there. What if Mike Williams is just a late bloomer and he's the monster, I mean, generally,
if he's getting over he just finally got over his broken neck, right? Like,
right. But I couldn't believe that it's like, there's not a throw in that deal. Mike Williams is not a throw in to a trade anymore. He used to be. Right. He is currently an auto start weekly play that is mossing guys. And he was a top 10 pick himself.
Yeah. What's his market look like? What's his market look like this offseason?
I mean, that's a lot of pedigree. So that is an example of he's a blank check.
Yeah.
He's a blank check. So regardless of, the angle being Justin Jefferson plus or whatever, but here, the whole thing is you can have nothing at wide receiver. You're in a rebuild and you say, oh, I got Chase and I got a couple other guys. No, now you got a wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. You have your entire team, your entire lineup is stocked up now. Right. You're good to go. You got young, you got old, you got somewhere in the middle. Boom.
Yeah.
Good to go.
It's attractive for all buyers. And you know what? When Ja'Marr Chase when he regresses some, like you could trade 2 of those guys back and get Ja'Marr Chase back. And there you go. You can take some profit off the top.
Can you imagine if next year at some point, or what if Ja'Marr Chase were to tear his ACL right now? I mean, you could then trade Lamb for Chase Plus.
Chase it
It
first.
could be that,
We got
and
this.
that's what where these angles are. When you've said this before. I mean, if you center the entire trade on one player, you need to be okay if they get hurt the next week. Because we've all been there. We've all made a trade at the wrong time. You could have traded for a player that, they get suspended or popped the very next week, or they're out for the year or whatever. You still need to make a dynasty trade. So you say, if I'm done with starts for them this year, I still like the deal. And that's always a key one for me. If you're making a contending deal, that's a true dynasty trade, that you will still say yes to that.
Yeah, especially when the price is up there. When it's a core asset level price, like you have to be confident that it's a core asset going along. Like if you're paying, a fourth for Darrell Williams, for example, like if he gets hurt, like you're not out. But if you're paying a first for a running back and they get hurt, right? Then yeah, I'm totally with you. Did you see the Deshaun Watson news, by the way? And I
saw smatterings of some of the news. What is the particular one you are referencing?
That there's a report out, and I think it was someone quoting a Houston Chronicle thing. I haven't read the actual underlying thing, but the thing that was circulating on the internet was, they have an agreement in place basically to trade him to Houston, but for two conditions, which is like the Dolphins need to know like what his suspension is going to be, and like he needs to not be in legal trouble. And I'm like, okay, so they don't have an agreement. Like,
and how many yards he's going to throw for next year,
right.
In a vacuum with Miami's weapons. Can you tell us?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So in other words, they don't have it
sounds like they need to operate in a conditional trade environment, right? I mean, saying, okay, so if he is suspended for more than 4 games, in 2022 or 2022 or earlier, then let's say one aspect of the deal is a second round pick. The second turns into a third, or it goes away entirely, or it turns into a fourth, or whatever. How about you just do the deal then like that?
Isn't this is like the exact opposite of dynasty trading though, right? Isn't this the if you wait longer, for Houston, you're in a better situation because you're going to have more teams, you're going to have more marketability of Watson in the offseason when you can clear cap space and when you can do all those things for other teams. And you're not in the middle of a season right now. Whereas some of that ambiguity might get cleared up. Whereas if you're trying to sell as a dynasty contender, you're on the flip side of that, right? Like hey, this person might not be more valuable next year. This might be a situation where they're a falling asset. It's the exact opposite. So it's interesting. Like I think from a dynasty community, we're like, hey, they got to do this deal. Like the trade deadline's coming up, and it'd be like, I think they're probably I think any team that's actually willing to do it is getting the cheapest that they probably ever could get Watson, because in 6 months there's going to be a bidding war, assuming that there's
and
some
you're not giving the prospect
resolution
of the picks, where part of the pick calculus of giving up your own first or something like that, or some aspect of the deal will probably or could be improved by Watson playing any meaningful amount of games this year.
Unless you're Miami and you were arrogant enough to trade away your first, which is going to be a top 5 pick instead of San Francisco.
Trading up for Jalen Waddle. You had it until the very end of that cascade of trades. You had it till the end, Miami. Yeah. Tank for Tua, and they're doing exactly that.
Yes.
They're tanking afterwards. It's like a tanking sandwich. If our picks are high enough, maybe we can trade said picks and Tua for Deshaun Watson. I love the logic here. God, there's some of these offenses are just painful to watch. All right. This is Chad Parsons, Jordan McNamara, episode 75. Jordan, we've made it. We're almost to 100. We're getting there. The channel continues. Episode 75 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Do you want to mention Props Fantasy, the newest way to play fantasy football using the teams you already have? What you're going to do is you're going to upload your lineup for the given week, challenge your league mates and the props community, or even your friends in other leagues. So you can sync your leagues, Sleeper, Yahoo, ESPN's coming soon, and get ready to win money over there at Props Fantasy. And best of all, there's no sharks. You can just play with people you know. You can just win because you're playing against your peers that, frankly, those home leagues, the buildup of playing the same people over and over again. Why is it? You just want to get over on. I'm smarter than you. And you know what? We have money on the line in our fantasy league. Now you can do it on a weekly basis. So you can head over to propsfantasy.com/guys. Give us credit over there at Footballguys to set up your rosters and start your first challenge today. The more you enter, the more chances you have to win. All right, so for trades, I got a couple others. Pretty interesting one here to start. So we've got Chris Godwin, upcoming NFL free agent. I'm really fascinated by Tampa. They kept everyone together. I'm wondering how much of that skeleton stays together in 2022. But 14-team league, we have Chris Godwin traded for Chuba Hubbard and Courtland Sutton, and that is to the Christian McCaffrey team.
Man, that is interesting. I think I like Godwin as the best player, and I don't think Chuba Hubbard probably stops me as being a temporary asset, so I'd take the Godwin side.
Okay. Yeah, we haven't really talked about Courtland Sutton much. He feels like one of those dynasty assets that he kind of blends in, right? He's not overly young, overly old. He hasn't been overly productive in his career. He showed promise. But doesn't it feel like Jerry Jeudy's coming for him and Noah Fant is there? Like, this is not a great situation. He has a better situation now than he's had other times. And it just feels like he's at a mid-career mode where I don't know if he ever gets all the way home. And I think Godwin could get home. I really like Chuba Hubbard, but I'm with you that Godwin has already been there, done that as a mid-range wide receiver one. And now he's going into the open market. And I think he's going to get a better deal than someone like Corey Davis and some of these other guys from past years. I think it's going to be Allen Robinson and it's going to be Chris Godwin. And those are sort of the cherries out there for teams.
Mike Williams too. He could be a potential.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
He could be a potential one too. How crazy is it? You think about the fact that Gronkowski and Antonio Brown both out, right? Both. We'll see with Antonio Brown what he certainly has the resume to be a Hall of Famer. Gronkowski a first ballot, consensus Hall of Famer. They're out and they just keep humming. It's like. Yeah, it's an embarrassment of riches in that offense, and Antonio
Brown is such a fun because you realize for 5 or 6 years he was the best wide receiver in the NFL. Few people argued that point, and he was out for a little bit. He was wandering in the woods, comes back, lives at Tom Brady's house. All of a sudden, he's an auto-start player again.
Froze his feet off at some point. Like,
exactly. Exactly. We didn't know if he was going to be able to walk again. All that Pittsburgh drama. Oh my goodness, makes Le'Veon Bell look like a, just one of the best house guests ever over there in Pittsburgh. Antonio Brown's out there fighting any way and every way not to play or whatever. I had no idea that was going to happen. Cryo chamber. All right, we got a straight up 1-for-1 here. Rhamondre Stevenson for Dalton Schultz in a no-frills 12-team league.
Dalton Schultz.
Is this an easy way to address tight end if you've been streaming your way to nowhere land?
Yep, this is a really easy way.
People are doubting Dalton Schultz, and I remember you were one of the few voices I heard. Well, frankly, I talked to you a lot, but that you were like, why is Blake Jarwin assumed to be the starter this year? And it was started out like a little committee, and it just keeps trending. That roller coaster keeps going down for Jarwin and up for Schultz.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's not that difficult. And this was one of those ones where I just kept looking at it and I was like, I should have acted more. It's one of those things like I saw this and I was like, this makes zero sense and is contrary to everything that we ever do in Dynasty.
18 or something last year. And wasn't he like tight end 30 or 35? Or I mean, he was way out there, way beyond what he did last year.
Yeah,
in his valuation.
Right. Yeah. I think he was even better than that in terms of like when you looked at, I think Jarwin played a little bit. And when you looked at when he was
the part he played. Yeah.
Yeah. When you looked at like he was out, Schultz was right up there. I think he was definitely top 18. I think he was better than that too, if memory serves. He was tight end 10 in the season last year. So, just in terms of overall fantasy points, which that's, again, the difference between 10 and 18 is probably all that much, but the fact that he sort of got to there and we're just going to put him back in a box, it made not that much sense to me. Again, I wish I would have acted to the level of 80% rostership, but I didn't, which was a mistake. But yeah, I mean, this is an easy way to adjust the position and one that, listen, you're turning an asset on your team from one you're not going to use, which is Rhamondre Stevenson right now, to one you're going to use. And that's the price that you want to do that at, right? You want the back end of your roster assets to be usable in some way, shape, or form. And I'm not sure you're going to feel confident with Stevenson at any point this year doing that. So flip him for Schultz and adjust the position really easy. It's fine.
Do you think Rhamondre Stevenson is going to be viewed by us who basically put these tags on players for livings, that is he going to be viewed as injury away in New England in 2022?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because you have JJ Taylor there, it's in and out. I mean, and you got to remember with their running backs, it's never linear, right? So I mean, it wasn't linear with Damian Harris, and Damian Harris looks pretty good now. Like it wasn't a straight line; it was rocky. I think that's in his range of outcomes. But again, like there's 20 other guys that are going to have that role. And like you can cycle through those, and you can cycle through that route. You can churn that roster spot over and over and over again.
But Schultz is a plug and play guy. I mean,
Correct.
He's basically
Correct.
It's Dawson Knox, it's Dalton Schultz of guys that came from far down to now you just don't think about it and you put them in your lineup every week.
Right. Well, and CJ Uzama, which you definitely think about. You just have to, and you just hold on to the lightning ride that is
friend of the show, CJU. Exactly. Second time in 20 minutes we're talking about him. Exactly. But yeah, Stevenson is just, I mean, we need to kind of view him because he was a 3rd round rookie pick in general, and he was a day 3 pick, like Chuba Hubbard, wasn't going as high. But if you're not an injury away though, you got to be really selective about the company you keep with those roster spots at running back, right? Because, who's to say you clear that spot? And this isn't actually clearing, but let's say in practice, you're clearing a spot and the pickup is like JaMychal Hasty or Ty Johnson, or just insert available in some way, or Joshua Kelly or whatever. I mean, just to put a parallel here, Joshua Kelly was an early day 3 pick with an intriguing profile, a good enough profile. And right now, at least before the bye, we'll see now, he was running for a couple weeks straight as the Chargers number 2 or 1B back or whatever. So why is he different than Rhamondre Stevenson other than being older news, if you will? So yeah, that running back, like you're arbitraging, you're actually moving up in terms of calculus for a role that Stevenson may or may not have.
Correct. Yeah. And just keep churning through it. Like one of my tactics this week is going to be, I'm just going to take a spot stash on Kylan Hill for like 36 hours, right? If I've got waivers running tomorrow and I have any open roster room, I'm just going to roster Kylan Hill until the kickoff of the Thursday night game. And then I'm going to cut him right beforehand, just because there's enough COVID going around that locker room that if it snipes out Aaron Jones, if it snipes out AJ Dillon, like it's already in the offensive huddle. We don't know who else is, and they're still testing and all that stuff. You could be in a situation where Kylan Hill gets a spot start. It's the Dearness Johnson thing, right? So being really proactive and just sort of hammering away at those opportunities, you can sort of make that Rhamondre Stevenson roster spot work for you. And I think this is double hitting that.
Yeah, no, I like that. I will say Aaron Rodgers will reach a new level on Mount Rushmore if he turns in like a 9 for 125 and 2 touchdowns from Randall Cobb. This will be a new level. If we get to that on Thursday and he somehow muscles up a win and takes down Arizona, this will be unbelievable. Watch Aaron Jones maybe pulling a Alvin Kamara for like 120 receiving yards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. This is going to be a fun Thursday night game. But yeah, exactly. The angles that you pull, I've almost started looking at it. You just mentioned like part of a segment of that, which is I look at so many different sections of the week that it's like, so you have the first one, the 1.0, the waiver run, but you also have before that of like, okay, am I dropping my kicker this week? Am I going to flow that spot until later in the week? I'm setting my lineup in case there's a Thursday player I want in or out. I know that right now. And that's sort of like the preamble. And then you get to the post waiver cuts that people are making of like, oh, you made a mistake. Let me pick that guy up. It's almost like, well, I bid $8 on this guy, 8%. And you're like, oh, but you dropped someone that I would bid more on. So I've cut the player I just picked up and bid on because I view the graphic mistake that someone else made as more valuable. But then you get to Friday, Saturday with actual probables. No, there's no probable, but with declarations of their status for the week, game time decisions. So Kylan Hill is your early week. For like 3 days, you're like, this is interesting. And then you get to Friday, he's going to be old news and not interesting and kind of declared one way or another. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there's a whole new bucket of players. Sometimes it's one player, sometimes it's 4. But Dearness Johnson, I remember a couple weeks ago, I think it was in that bucket of Friday through Sunday, hyper interesting. And now Kylan Hill gets a little early week love.
Right. And then it's even like, so it'll go all the way up to the inactives on for Thursday night for Kylan Hill. And then we'll, cut him before then. So you're not in a spot where you're stuck rostering him for the
somebody
week.
Somebody else, it's a Sunday spec play.
any Sunday spec play, just so that you have the roster flexibility. And then you have that up until inactives. And then again, last week, Stevenson's out. Like you all right, well, let's cycle through some JJ Taylor shares, so just keep doing that, and just, again, they're 1% to 2% bets, right? If you're just moving it up, it's not going to change the world, but you do that over and over and over again. And that's how you hit on Dearness Johnson.
You never know when you hit big. Yeah.
Correct.
And Dearness Johnson is a massive hit because, again, you got him for free and you streamed him on a week where bye weeks were horrible.
Right.
And yeah, this week you got Zeke coming back and Eckler and some other notables. And it's like, so things are different this week, but that was a brutal week. And if you can just get through, I had a week where this past week I gutted out a win. I had Josh Allen and Dak Prescott as my two notable Superflex quarterbacks on bye, but I started guys that I picked up for nothing. Taylor Heineke and Case Keenum. I had actual quarterbacks to put into both spots that other teams other teams, if they weren't stashing a bunch of backups and being proactive with Mayfield's playing, but his shoulder isn't right. You pick up Case Keenum for a couple bucks because people generally ignore him because they're not looking for, they're looking for who's going to stream, but they're not really looking to stash a known right now backup. And it's just, those points matter. I mean, you can say, oh, don't flex a quarterback. And yeah, maybe Mike White this week is the case where you actually don't flex a quarterback. But not many teams have a bad enough starting quarterback and a good enough positional player to actually make that worthwhile. The floor of a quarterback is a lot higher generally. The ceiling is higher generally. So even a Case Keenum that posts a 17, try to get a 17 after you already submit your entire lineup at running back and wide receiver. Tough to do. So that's why it really does matter. And like you said, these little micro moments of the week I'm finding, and I'm sure, man, if 39-year-old Chad was smart as 41-year-old Chad, I think I would have had a lot more fun in 2019 and 2020.
Totally.
I really didn't think this way of floating spots and setting your lineup early, and it creates more liquidity. I still look around and see people with 4 defenses, and I'm just I wish I could, just hang out with you.
Right.
I think you are just a completely different person than I am.
Right. I'll never make it to a point where I ever feel like I've done enough in terms of but you can always constantly be striving for it. I actually moved up in Scott Fishbowl. I'm up to 27th in terms of the standings. My quarterbacks include I got Stafford, Dak, and I've got Watson, who I've had to carry just in case, right? I just in case there's a late season, I wanted the upside shot, and I couldn't roster a super flex quarterback this week, so in went Dearness Johnson, and up in the standings I went. Right. So, I mean, those things, if you just are sort of constantly doing that, it can add up, even though it feels, if you're watching it from afar, it feels like the person maybe needs to get a hobby or something.
One thing that I've really started to not think about at all, which is these final roster spots. I used to be obsessed with turning those players into picks at every single opportunity. So the Alex Collins of the world, the moment he had that one game where he ran hot for 100 yards or whatever it was, and you might have streamed him, whatever, that next week, I would have been obsessed with trading him for something. Third, a fourth, whatever it is, a projected later third for an earlier third. And number one, that market is different than it was a few years ago. It's not quite as easy to do that in season. People running at those players, they'll bid heavily in the waiver wire, but they won't actually give picks in many occasions. But I've just realized, part of it is you're blocking other teams from having those players. They're going to be more messed up at running back than I am. And even if I pick up these players and I didn't start Dearness Johnson last week, that's okay. It's a good move because someone else didn't start him. It might have been against me. So you're playing keep away. And again, if Hunt comes back and Chubb comes back, and you might even drop Dearness Johnson in a few weeks. Absolutely possible. But that doesn't mean it was a waste at all. If you started him 0 times, it still wasn't a waste. So I used to be obsessed with, if I didn't flip him and I didn't start him, it was pointless. And now I've had a more, I want the best roster I can. You never know. And what you just said, what if one of your key running backs is out with COVID this week? Or what if they get hurt and downgraded in Friday practice? You might have the best plan right now, but you don't know by the time you get to Sunday who you actually need to start, or next week. We still have a lot more injuries to come. 2 weeks from now, you have no idea who you're going to need. So if I have 4 starting running backs on my bench, it's a good problem to have. If I can't flip 3 of them, it's okay. And the obsession of getting 306 in next year's draft for one of them is not the forefront of my thoughts anymore. And a few years ago, it absolutely was.
Totally.
All right. Do you want to remind you about the Football Guys daily email update? The easiest way is to go over on the site and go free email update on the right box of the top of the homepage here. A couple things from last week. You would have been apprised of the entire situation of Darren Waller being downgraded later in the week. Foster Moreau was a popular pickup. You also needed to have a pivot. If you're holding out for Darren Waller, have a pivot going into the 4:00 slate, Sunday night or Monday night. Have a plan if you want to hold out for him. Another one was Quentin Nelson being activated. That proved to be pretty valuable for the Colts. Carson Wentz, Jonathan Taylor, and that really fun game, despite being lower scoring there with the 49ers.
Yeah.
Exactly. It seemed like one team was a little more affected than other team. But anyway, Quentin Nelson, these are all news items that it's your catch-all. Joe Bryant, actually, they used to be out far earlier. I'm seeing them far later. They used to be 10 o'clock. They used to be 2 a.m., stuff like that. Now it's 10, 11 o'clock at night coming out. You actually even have the update from Sunday night with a lot of the action and news from the day, injuries to kickstart your week for waivers. So again, you want to be a part of the more than 500,000 of your league mates. You want to have the same information and better information. And you know what? Some of them aren't Football Guys daily email subscribers. So you want to at least be a part of that. You're listening to this show, also be a subscriber. Now you're up to speed in the Football Guys population of knowledge and information. Let's get to some of the quotes from the Football Guys Dynasty Forum this week. I got a few things here on Kyle Pitts. I think he's pretty interesting. So I'm going to rattle off a few things and then we can hit them a little more straightforward. Kyle Pitts' receptions today. So this past week, and it was a pretty bonkers game. 23, 13, 39, 26, 11, 23, and 28. He's not a tight end was another comment. And it says on pace for 88, 13, 35, and 3. So the touchdowns are lacking still. And then who would have guessed coming into this season that Atlanta's 2 best wide receivers would be their tight end and running back? And then another one, over his last 2 games of the 96 snaps Pitts has played, 76 have been out wide or in the slot.
What was that? Out of 96, 76? Is that right?
So, I mean, that's about 80%. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's a tight end, right? Like that's the interesting
2021 tight end.
Right. Well, I mean, how many receivers have played with their hand in the dirt 20% of the time? Like it's zero.
No, but can I ask you more of a macro question?
Right.
What does the wide receiver and tight end designation actually mean in fantasy then? If we're seeing more and more tight ends, the actual good ones like Waller and Kelsey, and I mean, they are playing standing up away from the line so often now. I mean, their routes run are similar to the wide receivers. So I would say, other than just having more weight, and some of them weigh about what Chase Claypool weighs, are we moving to? I mean, I didn't mean to bring this up, but I mean, like, it seems like we're not like what makes them a tight end coming out of college, like Kyle Pitts, for example, and then it seems like we're not going to get any of this. I remember Jimmy Graham movement of like, oh, I should be a wide receiver so I get paid more or whatever it was. That like, I don't think we're going to get a Kyle Pitts to wide receiver designation move coming down the pipeline. And part of that is just status quo of, well, he was a tight end when he came out and use him how you want. He's a tight end. It's kind of the like, I mean, it's not all split out. He's playing with his hand in the dirt a little bit. Wide receivers never do that pretty much, right? I mean, Alan Lazard maybe once or twice, but I mean, so is that just a moot point at this? Like he's actually a wide receiver. What are we doing here?
Yeah, I actually went back like several years. And I think that maybe once I found an intersection where there was a wide receiver that lined up in line more times than a tight end did. I think it was once in maybe like the last 5 years. Like it was very, very rare. It just is and that's the definition of a tight end, right? I mean, and that is, we obviously want him to stay a tight end for fantasy purposes. It strengthens the position. But it's interesting because you're seeing offenses use him. And honestly, like Arthur Smith, like you mentioned Cordero Patterson by reference. Arthur Smith is using players that aren't typical and traditional
offensive weapons.
Yes. And it's great. And I actually think, I was pretty optimistic about him coming from Tennessee because I thought he was a pretty good coordinator. Some of the stuff that he's doing is really interesting with how he's getting his best players the ball. And that seems like it's an easy thing to do. How many times have we seen tight ends come into the NFL and struggle? I mean, Evan Ingram, David Njoku, right? All of these, OJ Howard, like it's a tough transition. And a lot of times it's a tough transition because of that specific position. It's really tough to sort of just create stuff for. And so you're seeing Arthur Smith, like, be able to use him in an offensive weapon role. It's great for Kyle Pitts. It's great for Atlanta, and it's great for dynasty owners, dynasty GMs.
Where are you on Kyle Pitts? Is this a Jamar Chase thing where you say, like, if you were to buy right now, you're buying at the absolute, like, most hypest point? Like, it can't possibly be hotter in 12 or 24 months? Or do you say he's 21, he's already producing shoulder and shoulder with the best of the position, especially the last few weeks, but small sample size? Like, where do you kind of stand on that? Because he is someone that was viewed, some people were already taking him at tight end 1. If you had a different startup kind of view of how you built the team. I know a friend of ours, we co-owned a draft, and it was a 2 tight end league, and we drafted Kyle Pitts very early because the calculus was insulation, and year 1 is not the most important. Turns out he's year 1 productive too, but
he's pretty good. Yeah. I mean, I think the argument I would have for Pitts over Chase is Jamar Chase is replaceable is not the precise word for it, but I mean, we were talking about Justin Jefferson. We were talking about CeeDee Lamb. I mean, DK Metcalf, some other guys that are sort of in the same age cohort that have similar-ish profiles that over the next few years don't project terribly different. I think when you look at Pitts, it's a very different arc, right? And that would be the thing that I would say, like, if you're going to pick between the two, take the guy that's at the rare position because it's a lot tougher to, tougher
few guys
to make
that matter
up for.
at tight end.
Correct.
And the fall off we've seen, with the special seasons of Waller and Kelsey and Kittle at times that, yeah, I mean, it falls off to even tight end 5. So if you are at tight end 5, I mean, you're talking about you have a hammer throw over 2/3 of your league. And that's why if it's like tight end premium, or if it's a format where you're like, well, I can also flex these guys. I mean, if you happen to have 2 of them, you are monopolizing the position. And so part of the value is you can start the other one, but you can also say, well, you don't have them. Another team in my league doesn't have a difference maker. So that's what, we always get into the thing of, like, people say, oh, you have too many running backs. Like, you can't even start them all. Like, why don't you just trade some to me for 60% discount? Well, it's the same thing. It's like, oh, well, you got Darren Waller, you got Kyle Pitts. Like, one of them should be relatively available. It's like, well, I can flex one of them, and I can, also just have them. So, so that you can't. So that's the other like valuable aspect. So is Pitts, because we kind of talked about the Pitts versus Hawkinson profiles in the offseason of, like, well, Hawkinson, Pitts is an unknown. So where are you on the trajectory of he becomes more known as the weeks go by? Is it going to take the full season? Is Pitts over Hawkinson right now for you? Like, what's that push-pull of sample size versus, what Pitts is showing?
I think you have to take the tight end position. I think you have to take a different view of it than at wide receiver, just because you have more replacement options. I think Hawkinson, like
Dalton Schultz for a backup running back.
Right. I think you just have more options at the receiver position that are similar, right? So you don't have to take as much risk. And at the tight end position, it's really, in terms of upside elite young guys, it's Hockenson and Pitts. And I think Fant's a level lower than that just because volume and sort of the production to date hasn't quite been at the same level of, and I guess we could include Mark Andrews in that as well. That trio, I guess, up at the top of the position. I think Fant's a level down and Goddard thereafter. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to have those guys. I think it's a tier. I mean, I think most of the dynasty community is putting Pitts over Hockenson. And I guess my question would be like, what could I pivot? Right. I've got Pitts in a couple spots in some tight end premium leagues that I might try and pivot in the offseason and see what the gap is. I don't probably need to do that right now.
With how the season is going, that plus might be pretty substantial.
Correct. Right. And I don't see a ton of risk in it.
Should be. I mean, how it's going.
Right.
And it isn't the type of player that you got to get your money's worth, because that can be a trade that haunts you. If you don't get enough that changes your entire roster,
right?
And you say, oh, well, I'm good. I have Hockenson or Waller or, one of these other top guys at tight end. And you go, so I'll trade Pitts. I will help out the rest of my team in a massive fashion.
It better be a massive fashion, right?
Yeah, you can also mess up in a graphic fashion. Is the other way. All right, we have one more. So this is just trying to tread water right now at the running back position until McCaffrey and Montgomery get back. Had to start Freeman and Stevenson this week. Oof. So Stevenson turned inactive, and Freeman, as we know, is a cog in the dysfunctional Baltimore running back machinery that is Lamar Jackson and a hunk of old dust. So can you imagine, Jordan, a situation on one of your teams? Because we are in an exact opposite situation. Like we've been fine every week. Can you imagine being down to Freeman and Stevenson because you have two other backs and they're hurt?
No. Listen, we've learned this lesson, and it's funny. I sat back and watched and didn't really comment on it, but just chuckled to myself in my basement alone all summer when guys were talking about the running back dead zone. And, you got to get your running backs before the dead zone. I was
after 18 guys,
let's just wait. Like, we'll wait until 50 and just, we can sort of, and you get all summer where people are like, oh, zero running back. All you people that go zero running back don't know what you're doing.
Backups don't matter. You are correct though. I mean, in July, the backups don't matter.
They don't until it starts being live fire.
It's bill paying time in October, November, December.
Totally. And it's funny because
all these guys matter.
Yeah, it's funny because I didn't go zero RB in the Scott Fish Bowl like we were talking about before. The person that is in first place did. I didn't. I actually have Swift and I think Eckler as my two guys. I just said, I think I can wait at the receiver position. It just was a matter of like what's more replaceable. And but again, I've sort of incorporated our normal strategy, which is just take a ton of running back volume on top of taking a couple guys early and just it's like one of those flamethrowers, and you're just shooting running back points everywhere, and that's kind of what the deal is. I mean, just constantly, what's the easiest way to uptick your roster to make your floor higher, your ceiling higher, better chance of a bye, better chance for a championship? Turn wide receiver roster spots that you are not using and put running backs in the spot, even if they're not playing this week, even if they're not playing next week. Like, just expose yourself to that, to the risk at that position, and where instead of it being a risk, it's actually a benefit. And all of a sudden, like, your team will start be performing better. I'll never forget the story. Someone told me, they were like, yeah, I was going to rebuild. And so I traded all my wide receivers, got a bunch of picks, and just picked up a whole bunch of backup running backs. And it's like, I tripped into the playoffs and I won. Right? Like, it's a classic. I was like, yes, because you sort of liberated yourself from the dynasty orthodoxy and went the most efficient way. And that's what happens. Right. So just constantly be doing that.
Yeah, what's hilarious is I remember back in the summer, I mean, people were trading Madison away for a third round pick, or Dylan for a third round pick, and Gus Edwards for like a third or a fourth or something. And obviously, again, one of those got hurt. But Madison, 2 20-point games. I mean, try to get that out of your third round pick. That's like squeezing juice from a rock in the desert. I mean, take some rando Diami Brown, at that roster,
right.
at that spot. And it's like, you're just sitting, you're just
Right.
waiting. You're like, I don't know if he's good. I don't know if he's bad. I've started him 0 times. I have no idea what's going on. Maybe he's a wide receiver 2 for Washington next year. That'd be really cool. Okay. All right. And I saw a bad beat of the week. This is pretty much for the season. Talk about the luckiest team here. So this is like, are you even good? You're 5-2, 37% all play. Would have lost a great My Fantasy League category, 5. So all 5 of your wins you could have lost or would have lost. And then they're 11th in points scored. 11th, Jordan. How can you be 5-2 if you're 11th in points scored?
We're talking 24 team league, right? I mean, that's what we're.
Of course, okay. 17 team league. And 12th, dead last, DFL in potential points. So those points aren't on your bench, and you would have lost 5 matchups. So you've had the other team just botching everything about their matchup. They're so scared of you. They second guess everything. That's like in the league when they go, I'm going to let you set my lineup this week. And the guy just implodes the rest of the week overthinking it. And he beat himself. That's what's been happening for 5 of the 7 weeks. 37% all play. I mean, you're sitting there, your record is closer to being 2-5. Like, you were getting everything in your favor. You're 5-2. If you were this team though, wouldn't you be just sitting like, well, you're 5-2. You cannot close the doors on this season, no matter how bad you look, because you're 5-2. You've got a lead,
right? Yeah, I have one of those where
Yeah.
I have one of those where I'm definitely a positive negative. I mean, I'm positive on the win side,
but yet you are.
Yeah, and I'm like, all right, well, like, and actually, I've got future picks too. I'm like, all right, I've got a lead. Like, if I win 2 more games, I'm in the playoffs, right? If I win 4 more games, like, I probably have a bye. And like, I know I shouldn't be here, but like,
exactly. I'm here.
And now I'm here, and it's like, okay, and don't apologize for that. Again, think that out, because like in some of these, I have spots where I've got Michael Thomas. I don't know what's going to happen, but if I add him in and he's a wide receiver 2 for dynasty or for fantasy purposes from week, I don't know, 9 on or 10 on, whenever he comes back, like all of a sudden I've just made a free trade, right? And that team that was at league average or below league average is now up a tick, right? And so just think about those things again, and assuming that you're here now, right? You're here at where you are, and if you haven't had, you've gotten some record breaks, right? You've gotten lucky in terms of wins and, luck wins and all that stuff. But if you haven't had some of the injury breaks go your way, right? Those things can happen too. So again, just keep building your rosters. Don't apologize for where you are. And again, if you get in the playoffs, it's largely random anyways. So get in and see if you can get a bye now, right? Like, I wouldn't, if you're in the playoffs, like, don't rule out. And you and I were talking earlier in the show, like, it's never been more affordable to get difference making players with future picks than it is right now.
Man, I love the fact that Michael Thomas, like, what do we really want out of this season? Which is like, you've been stashing him, you've been holding him, you've been getting by. Let's say you're 4-3, but it's like, what you really want is you want him up to speed and full go when it's hammer time. Mm-hmm. And if that is, hey, I need a win to get in, or I need a win for a bye later on. I've been surviving. I don't feel great, but Michael Thomas, you plug him in and he replaces someone that's just okay. And if he is right and he's accumulating from good Jameis Winston this year, then I mean, again, that is, like you said, I mean, adding an auto start player. So if he's there in the end, or you have the right combo of running backs and you got a lot of cracks to get it, or if you got McCaffrey back and humming, or Barkley back and humming, when it matters, starting week 13 or 14 or whatever it is, that's all that matters. Can you survive until that moment? Because yeah, it sucks. If you miss Barkley for 6 weeks, you miss McCaffrey for a giant swath of the year. It sucks right now. You're hammering through. You're starting Darrell Williams, or Dearness Johnson, or it feels ugly, but you're getting enough wins. But if you got that all-star lineup when it matters, you're going to forget the rest. You're going to look and you're going to see 12 games played, or 11 games played for Saquon Barkley. And he also had a couple clunkers getting up to speed early in the season. But if he's putting up 60 points over 3 weeks when it matters, you're a tough out. And that's that's why I do think if you're the 3 seed and it's like you get the 6 seed that won 2 or 3 games and they have the right combo getting in, that's a raw deal. That is a raw deal because you could even be an underdog. Like you might have been thinking you were going to get a bye, you're limping to the finish. And if you got the wrong combo and they're getting Michael Thomas back, they got Barkley humming along, and it's like, they were sub 500 for part of the year. And now they are and they were on paper one of the best teams in the league. Tough draw. Totally. Not exactly 50-50. We'll consider that 55-45 going into that week.
Yeah. What's funny too is like I don't know if you watched the full Monday night football, but there's nothing stopping Michael Thomas from like a 40% target share in that offense when he comes back. Like,
oh yeah.
Like Kamara can get it. Like between the two of them, they could get 75+% of the offensive targets. It's just, I mean, it's absolutely like a difference making role is absolutely just on a plate for him if he comes back healthy.
Kevin White, your days are numbered. That's all I'll say. That was actually a fun game to watch. Like I like the occasional low scoring game. The next, one big play could matter and really change the game. And just one thing, Jameis Winston, he's doing the exact right thing, is he not? I mean, he's avoiding the big mistakes, playing within himself. They're
throwing the ball to Alvin Kamara. That's the right thing to do.
Exactly. But we're seeing good Jameis.
Yeah.
Like, we're seeing a lot of the good. It's almost like he can see the color jersey he's thrown to. It's graphic. All right. So
you don't usually watch the live games. Have you watched any of the Peyton and Eli stuff?
No, and that's one of the big things. I actually thought about recording.
They had Brady on this week, and Breeze was really good.
You missed out. Can I catch the cut up or something on YouTube or something?
Maybe you might be able to catch some highlights, but you totally.
Yeah, I gotta catch one of them. I have been meaning to do that.
Right.
Good stuff. All right. Yeah. So in this episode, we talked about Dalton Schultz. We talked about Jamar Chase, of course. We talked about Kyle Pitts and a lot about trading tactics, about improving your team, maybe future firsts, moving out of Chad and Jordan's dynasty teams more than it would have a few years ago. More of a seller's market than a buyer's market there. A lot of quotes from the Shark Pool as well. All right. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your dynasty leagues. Oh, I got it. Now it's
hit him
brick watch.